Volume 2, Intermediate Literature. And here we have Chapter 4, Practical Analysis and Philosophical Inquiry Inspired by the Mucusless Diet. So we're starting to get a little bit more advanced here, yet it's still material that I think everybody could benefit from. But Art of the Transition, Part 1, A Response to Stanley Bass and Others. This gets into an issue that many people face, that especially folks that come from the raw foodist perspective, oftentimes they will come to air it from raw foods and try to be too aggressive, so they'll miss out on the transition diet portion of it. So they'll try to skip over the transition and go directly to eating nothing but fruit for the rest of their life or something of that nature. And that's what Stanley did. He tried to transition way too fast. He had read Arrett, he was reading some other fruitarian thinkers, and he said, okay, well that makes sense, and he started eating nothing but fruit, and I think his teeth fell out and all kinds of stuff. He had no business just going to all fruit that quickly like that. He never transitioned, he never cleansed and transformed his physiology to the point where fruit eating is inevitable. That takes a lot of detoxification, a lot of transition to get to that level. And so Stanley and many others find that they get to a certain point where they might be feeling good doing whatever they're doing, but if they didn't transition well enough from the beginning, there's usually issues that befall them at some point. And I know some people say, well, if that happens, they didn't regenerate their glands and organs. They have organ and gland weaknesses. And this may be the case, yet there's still something to be said about this long-term transition that there's, in my opinion and from my experience, there's certain things that can't be dealt with any other way except for time. Because you have to put it in perspective, you have to think, when was the last time that I had a family member in my ancestry that was a fruitarian, that ate nothing but fruit? Some folks have to go back further than others to get to that time, and we are held accountable for every morsel of pus and mucus that was ever ingested by anybody in our bloodline. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody, but there's a hefty price to pay for transgressing against natural laws. And we're not saying anybody's evil, we're not saying anybody, we went through periods physiologically in our ancestry where they didn't know any better. It got to that point where we lost consciousness and we didn't know any better. We are now just remembering who we are and trying to go back. And so this gets into that, putting the transition into perspective. So many people think they're going to get into the Mucusless diet and a year or two later they'll be just totally healed or eating nothing but fruit or whatever, and I just haven't seen that. Most people have to really get into this thing for the long haul, and there's really no need to rush in the beginning unless you already come to the diet with some massive chronic illnesses, and that's the reason you came, is like, okay, I need immediate detox, I need immediate regeneration. We can have that conversation. You would be told a little bit different, but most people that I come across at some point, even if you have that initial intensive detoxification period, at some point you're gonna have to deal with this transition. And the transition is not only physiological, but it's also psychological. So there's people, you can the body is remarkable. There's a lot of things you can do physiologically, but if you haven't properly transitioned your consciousness, then you're only going to be able to go so far. So it's a holistic transition. It's not just physiological, and it's not just mental, it's not just psychological, it's not just spiritual, it's all of the above. And intuition versus intellect, I talk a little bit about my own personal journey. I had to use both intuition and intellect, and I learned how to rely on aspects of my intuition when that was strong. But then there was some things that my intuition couldn't tell me that I had to think through using my brain. So I get into that a little bit. How long was Arnold Ehret on raw foods? Arnold Ehret and raw foodism kind of gets into this issue of what are raw foods, as there's so many different interpretations and definitions of it, from raw food veganism to raw mucusless food. So we explore that a bit. Some other things here. Excerpt from the Scene Gospel piece where they actually talk about enemas. That's kind of an interesting excerpt. And talk about the cyclical nature of transition. I will speak on this really quickly. I look at the transition as a upward spiral, or as an upward cycle. And so the way a lot of people think about the diet is in a linear fashion. So it's like, okay, we start here, we're meat eaters, and we drink pus and stuff, and then we go over here, and now we're mucusless. Or maybe I should do an inclined plane. So we start here, and we're eating pus and mucus, and then at a certain point we're gonna be fruitarian, or we're gonna be all totally mucusless, or whatever. And so it's like this, and that's how they imagine the transition. It's just this progression that starts here and ends here. It's a very linear perception. In my opinion, that's problematic. What is more real is there's ups and downs. The key is to have the ups and downs continue to always move forward, so that you can never go down as far as where you came from. So you might start here and say, okay, I'm going up, this is good. And it's like, oh man, I'm going through an elimination. I don't feel good. And then you come back down a little bit, but you don't go as far back down. You start going up again. Oh, I'm feeling good. Yeah, now it's, I'm feeling bad again. Okay, I'm eating some nasty stuff. Okay, now I'm back. Mucusless, transitioning, feeling good. Oh man, big elimination. Okay. And then back up again. And it's this type of like a spiral, just on up. And the key is that every time you come back down, when you have a low period, you never go way back down. You never go back to the beginning. You always are going up. But there's cycles, and cycles are natural in nature. If you if you haven't noticed, whether it's the cyclical nature of seasons, or depending on what part of the world you are, if it's the world revolving around the sun, and we don't know what the sun's revolving around, but Earth rotating. So there's this cyclical kind of phenomenon is something that, to me at least, makes sense as a natural progression. So when applying that concept to the mucusless diet, it just makes sense. And what some raw foodists I've seen do is they'll start here, and then, yesterday they were eating steaks and cheeseburgers, and then the next day they're like, yeah, I'm eating number fruit. Woo, I'm raw, eating nuts and seeds and fruit. And then all of a sudden, they might even do this for 5 or 10 years, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, they hit hard. They go all the way down, not only all the way down, but they end up worse than where they started. Back into some Paleolithic whatever that people fall off and jump into that other thing. And so I'm saying, for me, what's rational is a slow constant, consistent, permanent transition. I can never go back to where I started from. I would have to transition back because I would probably physiologically, if I started eating the way I used to eat, I would kill myself. My body is not permitted to go back to where it started from. I would have to transition right back into mucus in the way that I transitioned out, and it wouldn't be pretty. So I'm not going back like that. So, but anyway, that is a little bit on the cyclical nature of transition, which is something I've actually wanted to explain for a while. So I went ahead and took a moment and did so there. So